Idea I've been working on, dropped it on Facebook yesterday, gonna explain it for you guys today. Proto-systemic oppression. I'll get into the definition later, just want to drop that in there, get your mind, taste buds watering, and I'll see you later. Talk to you in a few. So we're back. First thing we gotta do is talk about what a proto-system is. Proto is a prefix that I grabbed out of thin air, or you could say from Latin. That means in front of, originally, anterior, right? Like origin. The thing we got to talk about is what a system is. A system is just a connection of points. You got 1 point, that's just a point. You got 2 points. Now those 2 points have a relationship, and that relationship is called a system. So we have a proto-system. It's the original system, the original relationship. The thing we got to explain in proto-systemic oppression is the word oppression. So that's like mistreatment, abuse, imbalance of power in some cases. So in proto-systemic oppression, we have the oppression that occurs within the first relationships. What is an example of a proto-system as it pertains to sociology? Well, a proto-system is a relationship that occurs before institutionalization, right? So it's like before you go to school, before you go to work. Example of that relationship might be like the family unit or a relationship between kids on a playground, informal. It's important to talk about what happens in proto-systems because it informs the way we operate within institutions once we get there. So that's why I'm interested in where oppression exists within informal relationships like families and friends. It's non-systemic. Proto-systemic oppression is like in the subgroup of internalized oppression because it doesn't require the oppressor to actively push it down onto us. We kind of self-perpetuate this occurrence here within a family group. Some examples I'll give you in a second. An example of proto-systemic oppression would be if a father undermines the authority of the mother in front of the kids, particularly if that kid is a daughter, which is an example of proto-systemic patriarchy as opposed to institutionalized patriarchy, which is something that you might see in the government or the workplace. Then you have the daughter seeing the mother's authority being undermined right there in the home by the father, and so you have patriarchy internalized from this proto-system, so then later when it's encountered in the world, it's already normalized and it doesn't read as oppression. After that first impression, it's basically all downhill from there because she already saw the mother be given the inferior role by the father, so everywhere else in the world where she sees women given the inferior role to men, it doesn't even resonate as odd, it doesn't even resonate as oppressive, and so that's where internalized oppression starts. It also works the opposite way, so if the kid is a boy and he sees the father undermine the mother, then he gets this proto-systemic superiority complex that then he perpetuates out in the world through the aid of institutions, right? Both ways. Systemic oppression is the condition under which the oppressive ideology is imprinted onto us, leading to internalized oppression. It happens predominantly in the family unit or informal relationships before we move into institutions. Proto-systemic oppressive environments are the place where we first learn that we're perceived as socially inferior by whatever dominant group. They're of particular interest because these environments are usually the place of safety with our parent or guardian. While we typically like to look at systemic oppression, we have to start looking at proto-systemic oppression and attacking the ideologies of dominance and inferiority there so that we stop perpetuating these oppressive ideas. This is actually how systemic oppression is maintained. It is carried into the proto-systemic environment from institutions, seeded and normalized into the would-be oppressed person, and then carried back into the institution as normal behavior. The reason I'm interested in this is because culture itself is the biggest proto-system of them all. It is the informal place where humans come together and share ethics and values, and that is where our laws and institutions are born from. So when we talk about systemic oppression, we have to talk about proto-systemic oppression because the laws are only a reflection of the values that we hold in our informal agreements between each other. It's got to start earlier. I mean, it makes me think about the word culture, right? And the word proto-system, how it has this biological connotation. Well, when you think about growing little cells in a dish, what do they call that? That's a culture. It is the birthplace of life itself.